This is episode 3 in a video series trying to explain and simplify the convoluted and nuanced sport that is roller hockey. This video is going to be focused more on the different tournaments, specifically in the United States, but a little bit international as well. So let's go ahead and get right into it. In the United States, there are tons of different roller hockey tournaments, but there are 3 that really stand out from the rest. Those are going to be NARCH, the North American Roller Hockey Championships, State Wars, and Tours, the original roller hockey series. These are typically referred to as the majors, the summer circuit, or as I once saw on Twitter, the RHA Tour, which refers to the insurance company that insures them, Roller Hockey Alliance. They are considered the big 3 tournaments because they are literally the largest 3 tournaments that go on for the longest periods of time. They also have the most regional events throughout the country on any given year. NARCH is in Irvine, California for their national championships every year. Tours for the last 8 years has been in Wesley Chapel, Florida on the East Coast, but this year has moved more west to Missouri. And State Wars stays in the Midwest for its national championships, usually moves around between 4 and 5 locations, like Missouri, Indiana, Michigan, etc. All 3 of these major tournaments, as I said, host regional and smaller events throughout the year, typically anywhere from 20 to 25 events throughout the year. NARCH traditionally stays on the West Coast, playing in places like Southern California, Northern California, Oregon, places like that. State Wars typically stays in the Midwest for a lot of their regional events. Now, with that being said, all 3 of these events do host events in these other regions, like NARCH always does an event in Broomall, Pennsylvania. Tours and State Wars always do a winter event in Corona, California. So they cross paths a couple of times, but for the most part, NARCH stays in the West Coast, State Wars stays in the Midwest. Of these 3, State Wars operates a little bit differently than the other 2, especially at the youth level. At the youth level, for State Wars, you actually need to try out for your state's team, hence State Wars. So in 8U, 10U, 12U, you're going to have Team California and Team Illinois and Team Florida and things like that. There's not any individual club teams, like you're not going to see Farm Tough or the Lemonheads or anything like that. You're going to be playing for your team starting in 18U going all the way down. At the adult level, you're going to see mostly the same idea where you're not going to be playing for, say, Team Missouri or Team Michigan, but every single player on your roster, with 2 exceptions, does need to be from the same state. So you are still technically competing for your state. Those 2 exceptions are every team is allowed 1 skater from another state, and every team, your goalie is allowed to be from somewhere else because there's always trouble finding goalies. At the professional level for State Wars, this is called the PAMA Pro Invitational. Now, for the PAMA Pro Invitational, does not follow the rules of the adult level or the youth level. You can bring anyone from anywhere, but you do need to qualify for their event for the PAMA Pro Invitational. Now, typically how this works is the top 8 teams from the previous year make it into the next year, and then there's a couple of spots open for invitation, or like they did last year, which was a previous qualifying event. Now, the PAMA Pro Invitational is the only tournament that I know of off the top of my head where you actually need to qualify to participate in it. And as far as NARCH and Tours and the adult levels of State Wars and every other tournament series that I'm going to talk about in this video, you can just sign up and play. The next largest event, in my opinion, is the Wish Cup, which happens in Nashville, Tennessee every single year. And over the past couple of years has very, very quickly grown a ton of interest and size very rapidly. I wouldn't be shocked if this tournament ends up becoming considered the 4th major, or with another event that just popped up, maybe even the 5th major. However, unlike the other events like NARCH, Tours, and State Wars, Wish Cup does have the 1 event as of right now. There are tons and tons of other tournaments around the United States and North America and all over the world, so I'm just going to list off a bunch of other ones that you might be able to look up for yourself. The first one is ECHO, the East Coast Hockey Organization. ECHO flies a lot really under the radar. No social media. Their website looks like it was built in the 1950s, but they do have 25 tournaments a year. Bob that runs it is awesome. I love him. He runs a great local tournament every single time that I've played in it. To be able to find all of his tournaments, I think it's echohockey.com, and you'll be able to find everywhere that he's going through the year. Pacific Cup. Pacific Cup is ran by Darren Goodwin, who also runs NARCH, and is just a smaller tournament series that also typically stays on the West Coast for the most part. The Premier Roller Hockey Association. The PRHA typically only hosts 3 to 4 events a year, mostly in the New York City, Long Island area. The US Roller Cup. US Roller Cup is a relatively new event over the last couple of years, with tournaments all over the United States, even going to places that other tournaments don't go, like Wisconsin, even more recently, Hawaii. State tournaments. Now, while these aren't official state tournaments, there are a couple events like the Florida Cup and the Colorado Cup that do make an attempt to make a state championship style event. Now, these two tournaments have nothing to do with each other. I have played in the Colorado Cup myself. It was a lot of fun in the Pro Division. And with the Florida Cup being ran by Tyler Kraft, I'm sure that is just as great of an event as well. The Labeda Cup. Again, just another one-off event in one location that always happens in Phoenix, Arizona. I, currently residing in Arizona, have been playing this event for the last couple of years, and we do get teams from all over the place, like Vegas and Alaska and Colorado and all over the West Coast. So it does end up being a much larger event than some other smaller local tournaments. But there are events like the Labeda Cup all over the United States that rollerdadnews.org does a great job of listing on their events tab. So anytime that you're looking for an event, you go there. It's going to be the most complete list you can find of events happening both stateside and internationally. A couple of events I'm just going to talk about in Canada before I move into more international stuff is going to be the Coyote Cup, the Sea to Sky Championships, and more recently, even the Montreal Cup. There are many, many more events that happen throughout the year that I have not mentioned or talked about because there's simply just too many to list. However, the only other thing I'm going to mention is something called an Ironman style tournament. Ironman style tournaments are where you have no subs, so your entire team consists of just 4 players and a goalie. The whole event typically only takes from 3 to 4 hours at the most, with every game only being one 8 to 12 minute period, depending on where you go. The team fee is a lot lower. It's a great, fun, fast-paced game, and you're going to find these usually hosted by the home rink on a pretty regular basis. For example, my home rink in Peoria, Arizona, the Peoria Sportsplex, has an Ironman tournament every other month. Lastly, there is one other style of tournament called draft-style tournaments, with the largest one being called the Legends Draft Tournament. But there are a lot of smaller ones throughout the country with different gimmicks. The idea behind them is that you sign up as an individual and in a certain division, and you get drafted by team captains right there at the beginning of the event. It's a really great concept, especially for people who may not have a team to play for initially, or they're really just starting to get into the sport, or they just want to change it up and play in something kind of different. They happen all over the place, with another one that I personally just have heard about a couple of times, the draft tournament in Oakland, California, where the prerequisite to them starting the event and the draft order of the tournament is how well you can drink. Internationally, there are tons of localized tournaments, way more than I could ever possibly list on here, but the biggest ones that I have heard of, that I see online all the time, are number one going to be the Sparta Cup. This is a huge event that teams from all over the world fly in to play for, even players internationally flying in to play on random teams. They do a lot of really cool things like the teddy bear toss, where in one of the youth games, whoever scores the first goal, everyone in the stands throws teddy bears onto the rink. It's a lot of fun, very well organized. It's always in Valladolid, Spain. And an incredible event that I always see online. There's an international series called the IIHS, the International Inline Hockey Series. They host tournaments all over Europe, typically a couple times a year. And even right now, I believe they're experimenting with a 3-on-3 style tournament. So they're really expanding and growing and doing a lot for the game over there. A couple of other one-off events are the Yeti Cup in France, the Africa Cup, which is the largest event in Africa. Again, another really large event that lots and lots of teams from all over the world fly in to play for. The Prague Inline Cup, and there's tons of tournaments in Asia as well that I simply just don't know the name of. But there's a ton of great resources online to find all of these tournaments on top of the Roller Dad News events list. I have excluded international tournaments that are played by national teams like Team USA, Team France, Team Poland, etc. Because I'm going to make an entire other video on what international, national level roller hockey looks like, what those events are, world events and regional events and things like that. So go ahead and look out for that video later in this playlist, talking more about playing for your nation. I've also excluded tournaments from this video, which are played by teams in season-long leagues, such as the European Cup or the Coupe de France, which are tournaments that happen in the middle of the season for leagues such as Liga Elite in Spain or Liga Elite in France, where they have a mid-season tournament that has nothing to do with their regular season, but it is in relation to the league. Or Pi Half Finals, My Half Finals, things like that. I haven't included that in this list. How do you pick a tournament, and which tournaments are the best? A tournament being the best is totally subjective. Different players are going to have different experiences at different events at different levels. Your experience is probably going to be a lot different than my experience because you're coming at it from a different perspective than I am. Personally, because I grew up on the West Coast, I've played in probably 200 Narch events in my life, and I've only played in State Wars twice. I've only played in tours once or twice, so I just know a lot more about different events than others. However, in all the hundreds of events that I played in my life, the one club tournament event that I personally had the most fun in was definitely the Wish Cup. This is, again, an event that happens in Nashville, Tennessee every year. It's a one-off event. Colby Collier, who does this tournament in Nashville, they have the most amount of media, tons of roller hockey celebrities. I mean, every game is live streamed or has 15 different cameras pointed at it at all times. It also doesn't help that Nashville is a really fun city to visit. He also does a lot of things to try and mitigate weather problems and foresees things in the future. Colby just does a really good job at trying to make it the best possible tournament experience that he can. I also always hear overwhelmingly positive things about State Wars. Now, again, I've only been able to play in this event twice in my life, once when I was 8 and once when I was 16. But those two times, I really did have an amazing time, especially when I was 16. I got to play for Team Pride, which is like the all-star team for these youth divisions. They had a laser show and smoke, and they had a lot of theatrics about the all-star game. It was really, really, really fun to play in. On top of that, I know that the Palma Pro Invitational is always a goal for players to play in, who are trying to be pro players here in the U.S. State Wars is always typically regarded as the biggest and most important tournament of the year. Every event is ultimately going to be what you make out of it, how seriously or how much fun you want to have at it, how much you put into it, the players you play with, and the team that you're with can make or break an experience for you, regardless of what the event is. Now, lastly, how do you get onto a tournament team to go play in some of these events? Getting onto a tournament team where you don't know anybody is pretty simple. At least the way I did it when I didn't have anyone to play for, I would always wait for the tournament to post a team list, which almost every single tournament does, typically on their Instagram, their Facebook page, or their website. And I'll just look at the team names in the division I want to play in and DM them on Instagram. I would typically just ask if they needed any extra players, if they have any room, if they're charging a team fee, or if someone has covered it. Sometimes they'll ask me if I had any previous experience. I'd tell them some other teams I've played for, how well we did. And when I first started off, I just started at the bottom at men's silver and just played on silver teams and silver teams and silver teams. And then once I started feeling like I was confident enough to move up to gold, just started asking gold teams, and eventually have moved my way all the way up. When you're first starting out, that would be my recommendation on how to get onto a tournament team. If you don't just happen to know somebody or have a friend that is running a team or is on a team that needs somebody, just DMing them on Instagram or Facebook is probably the best route to go. Those are the most frequently asked questions I get about tournaments here, especially here in the United States. For more information, please feel free to DM me on Instagram or watch more videos in this playlist for other kinds of tournaments or other information about roller hockey in general.